I don't know, recent events. It's fall now, fully fall. Eugene, chill out. Eugene's going to be joining me, I guess. Um, Went to the Big E, which is the big state fair, basically, for all of New England. That was fun. Pretty standard state fair fare. Basically the same shit that you get at the Texas State Fair or any state fair. I love the state fair, although you do notice a kind of like at least me comparing it to being at Oktoberfest in Munich last year, there is a kind of qualitative distinction in that you go to Oktoberfest, obviously everything's money, it's all cost money. There's you pay for your beers and your food and whatnot, and there's multifarious attractions. You pay to get on the rides, you pay for everything. Everything costs money. It's kind of trivial, but there is a beyond that more of a sense of like a community, I would say, as opposed to one of society, which is what predominates in America. At the state fair, you'll see a bunch of people hanging out and whatnot, but these are all groups who have showed up together, groups of people all going and socializing amongst themselves within their own little societies. No matter where they go, they move in packs, and you can see different packs moving around, and there's very little communion with people who are not a member of your society. Whereas in at Oktoberfest in Munich, there's much more of a sense of community, even though people were coming from all over the world, and it's not all just Germans there. There's people from all over the place. But if you're sitting down somewhere and having a beer, the people next to you probably talk to you, or at least try to see where you came from or like what you're doing there. There's more of a communal aspect to it in the sense of just like talking to people around. But that's completely lacking, I think, in America in general. Even at these like theme parks, like can you imagine? Let's say you go to Disney World. Would you and you sat down in one of those the mess halls at Disney World, and you wait in line at the buffet style thing or whatever. You pay $20 for your smoked turkey leg or whatever the hell you're getting, and you sit down. The chances that you're actually going to like strike up a conversation or with the people that you end up sitting next to are very minimal. At least that's how I think it is. Or if someone were to strike up conversation with you, it'd feel sort of out of place. It would feel like an intrusion of sorts. Like, whoa, like I don't even know who you are. Like, why are you talking to me? Maybe this is a distinctly American thing. This kind of lack of community in general. I think that's the thing that I was noticing most about it. This is sort of different when you have a child and you're going around, because people will like, community basically exists only in the form of children and people who have children in America, in the sense that if you have children, you become sort of you're like basically the only member of the community. You exist in the community in the same way that other people have children do, and that's like, let's say you're over 30 and you had friends from college or whatever, but now everyone's moved around, and you don't really have that many friends around. You can either, and like, you work on it, you have a job, but you're like a remote worker or whatever, so you don't really have like in-person community in this, even in the sense of this sort of like work community type things. How do you make friends? Well, you usually, what happens is you have kids and your kids go to school, and then you make friends with some of the parents of the kids who your kids makes friends with. That's like community in America. You go to the soccer games on the fields on the weekends. You organize to take care of kids. That's basically the extent of community here. So like at the state fair, people would come up to me and be like, I'm not even joking all the time. I do have literally the cutest baby in the entire world. So people come up to me constantly to tell me how cute the baby is, and talk about the baby, and then talk about their own babies and their families, whether it's their niece and nephews or their own, or their grandchildren, or anything like that. That's like really where you even have the any semblance of community. And it's kind of funny for me because I'm generally not. I don't know. I'm used to living my life walking around in America completely unnoticed, undetected. Basically, my form of community is going to the bar and talking to people. Like, and when I was a bartender, that was my favorite part about being a bartender, is the fact that like in a bar, that's one of the last socially acceptable places where you can just where like you can kind of commune with people, in the sense of you don't have to know people. It's not an elite society to get into a bar most of the time. You just have to be of age, and then you can just kind of talk to people and hang out, and it's not considered like weird. It's not like an intrusion upon people. If you're sitting at the bar, you kind of are gonna talk to the bartender or the people sitting next to you. I do that all. That's it's something I like doing. I don't know. That's why I'm having a space. Is even though this is a bit of a more of a society, in the sense that I can, I'm the ringleader here of this little society, I suppose. It's different than a bar, but that it's, I think this is like just a thing that is lacking in America, especially for people in their 20s, people who like don't have kids yet, people who are like just outside of having an attachment to a community, in the sense of going to school, which is a community activity, and like playing sports in high school and things like that. It's easy to have a sense of community. You have the boys, everyone on the bus, etc. And you kind of lose that pretty fast. And then in your 20s, if you don't like somehow make it, you can be just lost for a long time with like very little connection to any community. And I think it drives people crazy. Honestly, I think it is extremely alienating, and it can make people extremely bitter and resentful of the fact that like community continues to exist, and ultimately is going to be emphasized over anything else. Like, there are people who are like, well, I don't have kids, so I don't care. And like, it's like, that's fundamentally like sort of an antisocial attitude. Like people who are don't care about the conditions of, let's say, the commons in general. That like the qual. I don't care about the quality of public schools because I'm not sending my kids to public schools. It's like, well, all the other kids are being sent to public schools, so it actually does matter to you. It matters to the community, and that sort of matters more than your own individual self-interest, or like your diminutive little society's self-interest. You see this all the time with even the elite of society in this country. They are able to create more policies, things like that, that are bad for the community in general, but benefit their society in particular. However, this doesn't uphold on a long enough time horizon. You could look at someone like Joe Biden, for instance, who, racial jungle Joe, who really would have no issue with, running crack cocaine into the ghettos and whatnot, because that's not a part of his society. They may be a part of his community, but it's not really a part of his society. But they are a part of everyone, the community of America is just everyone in America. There's no, you don't get to count yourself out of the community. Um, so ultimately, like whatever is done for this sort of benefit of particular societies at the expense of the community in general, even comes at the expense of those societies in a long enough time horizon. The billionaires are going to have a harder time of it in America the more they destroy the social fabric of the community, the more causing problems like look at San Francisco. A lot of policies that were to the benefit of the elite societies of San Francisco, but to the detriment of the general community of San Francisco to the degree that people don't are like moving out. Businesses are closing. There's and even if you're someone who's like part of these elite societies, you're a billionaire and you in your penthouse suite, looking down on all of the proles or whatever. You still have to walk those streets. And even if you have a private driver and you live in a gated compound, etc., you still have to drive on the highway. There's no way out of community. Community is inevitable, and so that's why I think there's like an alien when you feel the absence of community or community, as I would describe it, being destroyed by society. That is a prevailing American problem. I think I don't know what can really be done about that, except for like kind of the dismantling of various societies. For instance, like societies, I would call like partisanship or like the Republicans and the Democrats are societies. They are not communities. Communities incorporate people no matter what party or society they see themselves reflected in. But it's these fissures in the community along the grounds of various societies that are the cause of a lot of the rot and decay of American life in general. Um, you can still see like the good parts, like all the good you see is generally a reflection of the good of the community pouring through, like such as going to the Big E, the big state fair of New England, and seeing all of the different prize pools, different contests and things people enter just for the sake they're people engaging in autonomous production of knitted works of various types, quilts, blankets, paintings, photography, pickles. I really enjoyed looking at all the different kinds of pickles people were making. There was a vinegar competition for various types of vinegar, people making their own vinegar, like apple cider vinegar, etc. People bringing their giant pumpkins, all sorts of stuff like that. That is the genius of the community. That is what is on display there. That is what we I would consider to be like the best type of art is this sort of the autonomous production of just people in their own communities is always more interesting than the art of elite societies. Like our art of elite societies right now are these are is a what is it they call it Memphis whatever the neoliberal Plato people that are make up the iconography of all these NGOs and things. That is that is art of elite society, but that's not the art of the commons. The art of the commons is is a it's like a one piece T-shirt that you made yourself. Like those like that like the airbrushed Six Flags type of T-shirt, like you making the Tasmanian Devil, and he's a Patriots fan, and he's in a Jeep because those are the things you like. That's the art of the community is when people make things just to satisfy themselves, and they even reflect these sorts of things, like these mishmashes of like me as an individual member of all of these different societies or whatever, ultimately still a member of the same community. You can care more, you can like Harry Potter more than Marvel movies, and you're still part of the same community. You can be a Democrat who likes guns, and you can still be in the same community as a reasonable gun control Republican, libertarian, sort of, who believes in that based drag queens are cool. It doesn't really matter. People's little particular societal affinities have nothing to do with whether or not they're a member of the community as such. Anyway, I was thinking about that this week. The other things I was thinking about this week is obviously Haas had his sort of debate with Jay Dyer. Jay Dyer, not a huge fan of Jay Dyer. Used to talk to him somewhat years back, but basically he's like the type of person where it's like if you're not just going to submit to internet orthodoxy and take him as like the bishop of Rome in his own imaginings, then he's just going to call you a heretic and cast you out, which is what happened to me. You know, I was like, I just disagree with you on this, or like, you're just this claim you're making is just indefensible. The generally these types they come to their very weakly held societal alienation. Like the idea of being a fucking American, just a random American dude who is researching occultism in Hollywood or whatever, and being like, oh, this is all kind of fucked up. I guess I'm going to become an Orthodox Christian is kind of weird. It's kind of like to expect that this is the path, that this is the normative path or like the good path or something is a little off, because it's completely divorced from the community of America in general. This idea that we're gonna all convert to based trad orthodoxy is kind of ridiculous, and the idea that we're gonna just claim that it's kind of like the mirror image of land back settlers, ultra leftists, where they say like, oh, America is so sinful and so fallen and so satanic that the only thing that can happen is if we have this mass spiritual spirit, everyone converts to my identity basically, and then we can exorcise the demons of our own history, as opposed to like being able to like have a more normative relation to them. Um, so he's someone who will like be like, oh, Marx was a Satanist, and it's like, okay, that's just stupid. It doesn't make any sense. Um, uh, Conflating the like literal like Church of Satan with Marx is kind of insane. Just because Marx uses some ironic humor and things in his early poetry, which, by the way, Jesus also does when Jesus was accused of being a Satanist himself. When he's accused of harboring demons and Beelzebub, and he says, "If Satan casts out Satan, how then will his kingdom stand?" So that's generally the sort of irony that I think a lot of these internet converts to nonsense, to anti-communism, um, come around to, which is this notion that it's impossible for it to be like, oh, Satan can cast out Satan, in the sense of like Marx saying that the abolition of religion leads to its absolute flourishing, which is what he really is talking about when he talks about the abolition of religion in America having already existed and it being a more religious place for that reason. It's hard to like get this into the get people to accept this if they've been if they're like devoted anti-communists, and that's really their primary means of identifying themselves, is like, oh, I'm an anti-communist. So like they have no reason to have an argument or debate in good faith. It's because they don't have good faith. They're not affirming a positive thing. They're not anything. They are against something. And if you're defined primarily against a thing, then that thing is what determines your beliefs about it. So then if you're wrong about that thing, right, for instance, let's say you're an anti-communist and you're like, okay, I hate all X, Y, and Z, the Rockefellers are communists. And you're like, well, not really. And like, that's not what communism is. And they're like, oh, well, they get all upset about this. And they demand that their version of the thing that they're negating is the thing in and of itself. If you bring in anything from reality to challenge that or whatever, you're basically destroying the grounds of their identity, which lead to them to sorts of hysterics and just sort of shady behavior. Leads them to saying stupid things like Jay Dyer claiming that thought is like an abstract entity which has no material incarnation, or that the spirit, like that's effectively to say that the spirit is this um, abstract entity which has no material existence, which is literally the exact opposite of Christian metaphysics, which is primary and actually closer to what he would decry as Gnosticism. You might call Karl Marx a Gnostic, but he's actually much closer to the Gnostics in denying that all things have bodily form in the sense of material form, that the material is the means by which we come to know realities that are perhaps intangible or not sensuous realities, but are revealed by the material reality. That's the whole point of, like, otherwise there would be no need for Jesus to be the incarnation if there was no need for this sort of clarification to occur to humanity in the means like God existing in a body as a person. If that wasn't necessary, then Jesus is a heretic and he deserved everything that he got coming to him. If it's not necessary, if we could have learned all this without that being some sort of truth, I think he extended it further to say that um, knowing and feeding, or like knowledge and food, etc., are completely distinct in completely distinct ontological categories, which is the most absurd thing possible for a Christian to say, considering that in Genesis, knowledge is literally a fruit. So it's, you know, ironies abound with these sorts of people, internet society types, because they have to like, I don't know, I feel like it's just like a need to, if you're going to hold this sort of position that's extremely salable and consistent in a sort of foolish way that like Emerson would call or a foolish consistency, the hobgoblin of small minds. This notion that it's like, whoa, communism is satanic, and it's like making these sort of doctrinaire statements, and then just building these systems around these things that fall apart if you question even one of the most basic assumptions, and insert a sort of inconvenient material reality there. Because you could say, "Oh, communism is satanic." Oh, does this knowledge come from God Himself? God Himself said this. This knowledge came from the noeminal realm, and it appeared to you completely immaterially just because you were enlightened by your own intellect. This was revealed to you in a dream, perhaps. Um, Communism is satanic. Okay, well, what if it isn't? What if we point to Engels describing the Shakers as a as existing communism? Oh, well, the Shakers were actually satanic. That's what we'll continue down this line. And actually, every heretic, everyone who falls short of the Orthodox Christians are Satanists. So actually, there's only Orthodox Christianity. There's only Orthodox Christianity. That's it. And if you're anything else, you're going to hell, or you're already in hell. I don't know. It just seems stupid to me. But I'm a heretic according to all these people, so whatever. This happened, and this has all been on everyone's minds, I guess, because I had to discuss whether or not infrared should uphold a religious orthodoxy on some question or whatever. Last time I held this space, this guy was going off about that. After I was talking to someone who is Muslim, I believe, about these sorts of theological issues. I don't know. I was talking to Haas about it later. He was saying because he banned discussions of religion because you just get this type of Jesuitical autism, casuistry of people just trying to for like create these like tests of tests of dogmatism, the way that the like Japanese emperor would have you, like, step on an idol of Jesus or whatever and then execute you if you refuse to, like that when they had their Christian missionaries and whatnot. This idea where it's like you must uphold this orthodoxy or else you're banished. Like, I don't know. I think it's all vain and a waste of time when you could just be trying to explicate the material reality that we actually live within and use it as a means of revealing truths. That's what I try to do anyway. This is all open, by the way, if anyone wants to hop on. Otherwise, it's going to be pretty boring. I'm going to do this until 3 p.m. my time, which is about hour and 40 minutes left. So if anyone has anything of particular interest that they'd like to talk about, just raise your hand in here, demand the microphone, and I'll give it to you. Otherwise, I hate rambling so much to myself, you guys. I hate it. Although I think I've gotten better at not saying like so much or and pausing. It's pretty hard for me to not do that. All right, we got Eric Hammerbacher. What's up, Eric? What can I do for you?
Hello.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, man. I don't know. There's just no one else is talking, so I figured I'd hop on and see if we can That's something to talk about.
I appreciate it. What do you want to talk about?
um, I know the other stuff you just said just now. It's kind of resonated with like a crew I'm in. Like, I remember living in Saginaw, Michigan, and I got some good friends, but we both kind of came up in like the wake of like Jordan Peterson's prominence. I was kind of in the like red pill new atheist kind of
Yeah, yeah,
mode and
yeah.
that, and so we went through all that together. But those guys kind of ended up in this kind of turn towards the like institutional kind of traditional orthodox like internet like traditional religion. And my good friend in particular who reminded me of what you were just saying, he wasn't. I went to Catholic, a cradle Catholic, and he was kind of the opposite and kind of converted. He's like a Catholic convert now, so
Oh, they're the
we had this kind
worst.
of weird like this weird kind of friction that was never there before once he did that, and so but it was, I don't know, it resonated with what you're saying for that
Yeah,
reason.
I've heard like there's a couple. I know a couple of people have had like even like in amongst their sort of like internet friendships, not even just like IRL friendships or whatever, where you have people who like become like it's particularly the converts like this type of a it's interesting because it's like it's a conversion that's like not even mediated by the institution itself, but it's like come to purely rhetorically in the first instance on like the internet, right? And then it's like, okay, well now I have to go like in order to defend myself better in internet debates, I need to go to church so that I can say go to church to people who don't. And it's like
Yeah.
it's funny for me too because I was a cradle Catholic as well. So it's like, listen, I've gone to enough mass. Like, you don't need to, you don't need to be on my case for this shit.
I don't remember like the details of all that upbringing, but it's embodied in me, in a
Yeah,
way, and it isn't for converts,
yeah. They also
So
don't know what it's like for children, which is like the other thing that I find more like worrying, right? Because it's like you. So now you're going to subject your children to something that you don't even understand. Like you didn't go through the process of like being catechized as a child, and like how different that
yeah,
is from converting after being a new atheist child with like parents who didn't give a shit one way or the other.
yeah,
You're like joining a cult
yeah.
instead of like
I
being in the
mean, but
cult.
anyway, this guy in particular is like he's like a really good friend of mine. And it was like we had kind of this like tight kind of philosophy friendship, and then there's this friction because of this conversion. And it's like I mean, we didn't really get in a fight about it, but I was like, okay, you're one of my best friends. Like, what? And he's like a genuinely like intellectually honest person, but it's like there's this kind of like I don't know, like I don't know what it is, but it's I mean it's personal. So I don't want to talk too much about it, but it's like I mean that kind of sort of thing is like with a lot of these like internet people, there's kind of this weird like algorithm driven kind of or like status game group chat driven thing. It's like I
Well,
don't
it's
know.
because people socialize so much on the internet now. Like it
Yeah,
actually is.
so much of it is like text
Yeah,
driven. Like on Twitter.
and
Yeah,
it's like the same things happened with people who socialize primarily like let's say through like role playing video games, where it's like you're used to maintaining at least some level of like improv identity formation in the sense of like if you play Dungeons and Dragons all the time and that's like all the only way you have friends or on a Discord server or like a World of Warcraft guild or something, this
yeah,
identity you're creating in a virtual space uh, starts to bleed into reality in the sense that, not that it's like that's unreal and like you are literally sitting there on an internet space like you it's like this idea that like you go the internet is this like a non-corporeal realm I think is very funny too that people tend to work on but that so that the incentives though are totally different than like real life socialization. It's also completely fucking up Zoomer, like not Zoomers, what are they, Gen Alpha underneath them, from having to do like Zoom schooling and stuff. Because it's one thing to be socialized in person and then to like take that socialization in person like onto the internet. Like for instance, if you know like if you there's a difference between meeting like a girl, let's say, in real life and you're like, oh, we get along, like now we can talk via the phone and things like this. You still have like a
yeah,
baseline of like kind of a real socialization in that you could maybe imagine like what their body language might be that you can't have communicated to you through just the sound of one's voice or whatever. Like
Yeah. Also, the sound of voice is like a major thing. If you only meet him on Twitter, for instance, you never even hear
yeah,
the
yeah,
voice. It's
but
like,
like a lot is
there's like,
communicated, and
I'm always saying that's like a apples and oranges thing. Like if you met him first in real life, or if you met him first on the internet, like those are separate ways of meeting, knowing someone.
yeah, I mean, I've made a ton of friends who I've like known first and primarily through like where it's kind of the opposite, where you're kind of like approaching from like this sort of abstract presentation of like just only text, and then like eventually you meet in person, and you might still get along, or like you're like, oh, that makes sense, like he's like that. But a lot of the times, like
You still have that character. You still have that persona before you knew them, kind of coloring it
yeah,
though.
but
Like for this
also it can
happened for me.
completely destroy the
Yeah,
persona. Like there are instances like people I knew in like frog Twitter or whatever, where I'd be like, "Oh, I thought you would be totally different than what you're like in real life or whatever, just from like the way
yeah,
you present yourself online." And then there's other cases where it's like, "Oh yeah, this is exactly like what you seem like." But if you can get away with a lot more in these sort of low resolution media, like in the sense of if you're only text and an avatar, you can pretend to be almost anything, and it's like
uh-huh.
you're just being persuasive, but you can't persuade people to anything about yourself in real life face to face because like for instance if you're like I'm fucking ripped bodybuilder dude or whatever, it's all in text, like you never have to back that shit up or whatever. But in real life, you could just be a
Yeah,
normal looking guy and just be like, you just seem like a normal looking guy. I don't know.
yeah. No, I mean, and that's kind of why I've tried. I don't have as much of an internet presence as you, but like I've always been like trying to take like the idea of like the Jim Croce song "I Got a Name" kind of thing. Maybe too much of a boomer sense, but like like I put my foot in my mouth pretty egregiously in my youth under my own name. I'm like, fuck it, I'm just gonna not hide under avatar ever and just like say what I think when I
Yeah.
have something to say. And like, you
Yeah,
know,
no, I understand. I get that entirely. Like the reason why I was a pseudonymous was like for a couple reasons. Not ever because like I'm like afraid of like I'm just being myself, like honestly. Like I'm not pretending to be anyone I'm not.
yeah,
I never really have. I've always just said like what I think, and just trying to be myself really. Like even Yasam, or this the R backwards in Russian there is I, and Sam is myself. So I was just making a play on part of my
that,
own name, just
that's
being
what I
like
mean.
I'm just being me. But my
Yeah,
name is also like I did. There's more for like considerations of like branding almost explicitly, where it's like my normal name uh, is a very common name, and there's already people who are way more famous than me with my name who I'll never be able to compete with when it comes to like search
like
algorithms.
your first and last name together.
Yeah, so I don't,
Yeah,
and my anonymity was mostly to be able to like it was more like a poetic choice than it was like an attempt to hide anything about myself, I guess. But a lot of people they're making like they are actively trying to hide their material reality in the sense of like face to face, like who they actually are in real life, like what do they actually do. I think that's like a distinct form of anonymity, which I think is probably more evil than the anonymity of like playful anonymity, I suppose.
yeah, no, I think so too. I mean, I don't know. I go back and forth on it, but like now there's so many like these accounts on Twitter where it's like, and then you got to deal with the problem of like bots and AI, where it's like there's just these kind of poet accounts that are just kind of a picture of an animal, just kind of just saying disembodied things, directing at no one in, general things are directed maybe at know who it is or who's writing it. And it's like this is such a hall of mirrors if you still kind of feel like you need to be in like Twitter as a
It's
dating
kind
app.
of it's kind of like being trying to be a real person on the internet these days is like if you were in like the Hall of Presidents, right? Where it's like you have these animatronics or like a wax figurine museum or whatever, and like you're
Yeah,
standing as one of the exhibits, and people and like they just keep everyone keeps being like, "Wow, this is a really well done fake," and it's like, "Well, I'm not fake." It's like, "Yeah, wow, that's really good." And you could even say that it's not fake. That's crazy. But
yeah,
but
yeah. And like, how do you know? It's like this. You can get to the find, or like even like this AI deep fake thing with the photos,
yeah,
like that. Just I just it's uh like
it's gonna get to the point
I
where
tried to plug a photo yesterday
the
of
only
like
thing you can
Woody
trust
Allen and Scarlett
is like
Johansson.
face
Like,
to face. Like that's ultimately going to be like the only thing that you can trust is if like you can see this person in the flesh. Like at this point, that's
yeah, I mean, even voice, even in these spaces, I might trust like that you're a real person, but like, some rando comes in here and just like, like starts saying stuff. And it's like, is this a real guy?
Yeah, or is this
It's like,
someone pretending to be something
I
else?
mean,
Yeah.
you usually figure it out in a minute, but like, it's still early on in this technology. Eventually, we're not gonna be able to figure it out. It's like,
Yeah, I do think like social media at a certain point is going to like just it's going to be like email. You know how it's like everyone has to have an email, but it's like if you're socializing primarily via email, then you're like I don't know if anyone who does that, frankly, or people. I think
yeah,
it's just kind of going to be outmoded because it'll be just be full mostly of spam and shit like that, and like your bank things like that. Like that's what social media is like on its way towards in general. This platform included. I mean, you can't do anything on this platform without getting like OnlyFans bots underneath your shit, and
yeah.
or
That's that's
it's
that's whoever likes my stuff. I just been followed by like, like 50 sex bots in the past 2 months, and like
yeah.
that.
There's
It's
tons of shit
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Like it's harrowing.
yeah. No, the phrase from that Dylan song, "Changing in the Guards," where it's like the palace of mirrors where dog soldiers are
Yes,
reflected. Like I think of that mirrors is like, the internet.
the wailing of chimes.
I don't know if that's what he was on about with that song, but like that makes sense to me as a metaphor for
The
the
wailing
internet.
of chimes is like the notifications. Also, like
Yeah,
that's good.
yeah. No, I've loved that song ever since I first started. Like, where the hell did this come from? It just seems like it came out of like a
That's
fever
one of my
dream. It's
favorite
like,
songs, like of all time. I
yeah,
play it on guitar a lot.
yeah,
I love
yeah.
it. He said that he said that that song like was like came from beyond. That like it's just like
Yeah, I read that after. No, I read that after the fact. Maybe just this past year, I read like a little interview where he said where it came from is kind of just sitting out the, in the ether 1,000 years ago or something. But it's like, I didn't know that when I first heard it. It's like that's cool.
yeah, it fucking
I
rocks.
explained it that way. Yeah,
Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to talk about, man? I mean, we could talk about how great Bob Dylan songs are, but I don't know how interesting
yeah.
that is to
I
other
mean,
people.
yeah, we could. I could talk about that for all day long, but I don't know. You got other people here, so
Well, it's been nice talking to you, man. I'm gonna have a next person on. All right, peace.
okay.
I'm gonna try to emphasize people I don't usually have on, so I'm not gonna have my juggler friend on. YL, I don't think I've had you on before. So what can I do for you, YL? You're on. You just gotta unmute yourself, doggy.
Hello.
Hey, what's up?
Hey. Yeah, I was wondering. I had a question about the sort of historical development of the Abrahamic religions.
Sure.
So I've listened a lot to what you said about Catholicism, kind of what Michael Hudson says. So my question is, do you kind of see? I mean, my personal view is that all these sorts of Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, they're all kind of the same thing in a sense. And my question to you is if you think the emergence of each of these religions is sort of God's way of kind of setting humanity back on track. And like even like the Protestant Reformation is, I kind of think
Yeah.
of being in that same vein. And like this is a big part of this is coming from like viewing Catholicism as kind of Christianity going off track, and then Islam kind of sweeping in from the east to kind of try and correct it, and then the Protestant Reformation kind of bursting in later to try and correct that as well. Just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Hegelian in the sense that I think that everything, and Leibnizian, I suppose, where I do think this is like the best of all possible worlds as well, and that we're like that the thing that things are ultimately good or like ultimately are justified in the end, and then like this end reflecting back on things makes reasonable all of the developments. Reasonable doesn't necessarily mean good, but it's like reasonable. Um, I think that the real is rational. So I think that all of these things, like as you were saying, like these developments are like means by they're educative in the sense that even if it's like Catholicism, I would say is evil, perhaps even evil, perhaps even the Antichrist, for instance. Um, I think it's also like a necessary step in like the process of mankind's education. So I think that all of these things that all of these various things that have happened, all these various forms and religions, et cetera, all these different political forms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that all of these things are like processes that we are undergoing and going through as like an educated process for not just like individuals, but for humanity as a whole. And that this process has its own is reasonable, or that there is a rationality to this process, the historical process, and that it has a telos and an end. And that end is like the establishment of like the New Jerusalem, the kingdom of God, etc.
Yeah, I also wanted to ask you about the what the kingdom of heaven will look like, because I mean I've been on upon your recommendation I'm reading a little bit of the Bible.
Yeah, you just got to read the
Heaven.
last book. And the last
Yep.
book of the Bible is the book of Revelation, and the last book of the last book is primarily devoted to describing the exact contours of the New Jerusalem in a in a sort of symbolic sense. Like it's basically the Garden of Eden as a city, in the sense that we have a command over. We're no longer alienated from our own conditions. We've like returned to the Garden of Eden essentially on a higher plane. There's like described in it like trees bearing all manner of fruit, like in the sense that you like grafting, we even do this in a very literal sense now, where you have like citrus trees that grow like all manners of citrus on the same tree.
Yeah. Do you see like this sort of new renewed Eden, I guess, like being something that will be like a physical reality,
Yeah,
like as we know it on Earth,
yeah,
um, like looking forward towards the future, like I don't know, like
yeah,
nuclear reactors powering everything. Like, do you see it literally as being that? And I know that word literal has like
yeah.
some issues with it, but do you see it being pretty much that?
Yeah, I do think. I mean, in the same way like Marx would, but I think this is literally in the text itself, where like the whole emphasis is that like the new world, like the new heavens and the new earth and the new Jerusalem, etc. That these are all like corporeal, like material realities. That they're not just these like kind of intangible or like otherworldly multiverse, like dimensionality or whatever. Like we're going to be in a different dimension. It's like no, this is all literally going to exist. Like this is all going to be done materially. That's why the bodily resurrection matters so much in Christology and things like this. That it's not like this. Well, it's also like there's obviously people have a lot of qualms with this, like the doctrine of purgatory and things like this in Catholicism are effectively against this notion, which is the notion that you die and you're completely annihilated in death, and then the bodily resurrection is like the miraculous recreation of you in the same way that all of the material universe comes from nothing. That this new universe would come from nothing in the same way, but it would be created by mankind's own actions.
So is I think isn't there a passage in the Bible that talks about the dead rising from the earth or something like that, or maybe
Yeah, on
some.
the last days.
Yeah, is that do you also like that's I suspect that's there's some sort of metaphorical sense to that, but do you see some sort of um I don't know,
Well,
like the
people are claiming to do this
material.
right now, right? Where they're like, "Hey, like we put all of this person's works or whatever into an AI, and now we're giving it a robot body, so you can talk to Albert Einstein or whatever." I think that's sort of like a low resolution notion of what, or like kind of a parodic, even a demonically parodic form of what this would mean. But I don't know. I again, like I don't know what the capabilities of mankind are in the future, particularly. Um, so I don't know. I like this is one of those things where it's like you have faith that this is the case, and you live as if it's the case. You live as if like you will be brought into the new world,
Hmm.
because that's like even like I don't know. This is like Jordan Peterson type thing, where it was like, oh well, these are all just like sort of like useful myths or whatever, parables, blah blah blah. But I do think that the more meaningful like material reality of it is that like you have this moment in time that you exist within as an individual, and that is ultimately only meaningful to the community of mankind as a whole in the entirety of time, in the sense of eternity. Like that's your actual proper station, is to imagine yourself as not just a member of like a specific community in this moment of time, but of the community of mankind in the entirety of time.
Kind of like the human collective all throughout
Yeah,
history. Yeah,
Marx
pretty.
calls it species being, right? But this is really just this emerges from the Christian notion of like the fraternity of all men in all times.
Mm. And do you think communism is the inevitable next step in that trajectory?
Yeah, I do think so. Whether or not it calls itself communism or whatever, but the on an economic level, I think that the future of humanity is one in which we have a more rational organization of our economy. I do think communism is like more rational, like more reasonable, more productive, and just well is inevitable in that sense. So that's why I believe that. That doesn't even really feel to me like a sort of faith-based thing, but I just sort of see that as like the inevitable result of reality, like the realities that we face as a species.
Yeah, I mean, looking at China, it does seem like that is the system there is just practically more effective. Like it gets the job done better, more
Yeah,
industry. So
yeah, it's like lifted people out of poverty faster. Like, well, the thing is like, when people, well, you say this, right? You say like, well, it's lifted more people out of poverty faster than any other system has in all of human history. And people go, oh, well, that was actually capitalism doing that. And it's like, okay, you want to call it capitalism? Fine. I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, why don't we have those policies?
yeah. Do you have any thoughts on infrared, where that will where that's headed, that movement?
I don't know. I don't really think that there's very much that can be done with like these sort of like internet-based movements doing anything. Although I don't really know what else there is to do. It's just that when you have like someone like Dianne Feinstein being in the Senate until she's 90, we have like a more moribund and older gerontocracy than the Soviet Union ever had in its most decrepit days. And there doesn't really seem to be many pathways from uh, for like the generations that come afterwards into political power in any real way without like effectively serving the interests of the gerontocracy. Like even if you want to run for, I don't know, I don't know. I don't think there's really that much like organizational capacity. To me, like I understand infrared as more of like a cultural research unit in the same way that the sort of CCRU was, where it's putting together a sort of worldview and arguments or whatever in its favor in the same way that myriad other internet communities do. I just happen to be more simpatico with it than other ones that have emerged, and I'll be here whatever happens with it. Like I'm not uh I'm not like attached, I'm not like in the Discord or like in the hierarchy of it or whatever. I just get along, I see things somewhat similarly to Haas does, and we have productive conversations. So
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get the sense that at least in this current historical moment, it's a sort of intermediary period before things will be shaken up a bit,
yeah,
hopefully
I
a
really
bit better.
don't like I think that things are going to get real bad in the next 5 years. Not that they haven't already, but there's been obviously a major change since like 2019, like where we're kind of already in a kind of new political situation post COVID, and with like the Ukraine war and things. It seems like Ukraine is getting wound down. We're sort of spinning that off for the Europeans to manage so that we can put all of our focus on China and the South China Sea and Taiwan and whatnot. That seems to me to be what the emphasis is going to be going forward. Um,
And for that, like, even I think, like, let's say Trump gets in again, I don't see how he will manage that situation.
Yeah.
I don't think he will, though. Like, I think it's become pretty clear that he's just not going to be allowed to run in a real way. Like, I think he'll be taken off the ballots and things.
Well, you think it will get that?
Yeah, I do. I do think it'll get like that because I think that basically a lot of what January 6th was sort of a a representation of the fact that like um, he's not if he's not organized enough to he had the popular mandate. Like there are people like Trump has shooters like no one else does. Like obviously everyone knows this, which is why people are freaked out by it. But if they don't like they could have literally like he just doesn't have the organizational capacity to do what actually needs to be done. So he's ended up setting back the goals of anyone who would want to, let's say, replace the government in a sort of revolutionary action. He set those people back quite a bit because now like the Republican Party is obviously split against itself, where there's the interests of the Republican Party and then there's the interests of the American people. Those aren't necessarily the same thing. The interest of the Republican Party is to keep winning elections and siphoning money from their donors. The interests of the American people only line up with that insofar as they perceive it to, and I don't know. It seems to me like they're not going to allow him to run again because there's not even people inside the Republican Party who who want that to happen that much. Like they're kind of a minority within their own party. Um, I think people will get more radicalized the worse things get, and if there's any sort of chance of a real revolutionary change in America, it would look like 50 to 100 years out from now. Honestly.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, the whole situation just like sometimes like utterly disgusts me. Um, but I guess
Like if you want to make real revolutionary change, like even in America, like look at like Michael Hudson, right? Like Michael Hudson is doing like the best work I think around, and he's been around long enough to have a type of authority in what he's doing. And like so he's like going over and like talking to like BRICS countries and like China and stuff. Like that's like the real like if you have like a revolutionary fervor or something and you want to apply it in a real material way immediately. It's got not like doing that inside of an American context is very, very difficult. I don't really know where you even do that. Like, because then it's like things are so compromised here, and I don't know. Like, I don't know how you would do that. Like, I have no idea personally. Like, if you really want to, like, I guess the best thing you can do is like tell the truth about America. But that's not even like for the necessarily in the interest of Americans to hear. A lot of them just want to be like, willfully. They just want things to like be not as bad. They just want things to be like they were nowadays. They're saying like, oh, I wish that things would just go back to 2019. But in 2019, people were like, oh, I wish that things were like before 2008. And then people were like, oh, I wish things were like, you know what I mean? Like everyone was always looking back to like a time of greater American affluence for the average working class person, which is, I think, just behind us. I don't think we're going to recapture that in our own lifetimes. Just politically, I think it'll happen like by necessity, and that means it's only going to happen when things get bad enough where there's no other alternative. So if you tell the truth about America like this, right? Like ultimately it's just more beneficial for people outside of America who like might be prone to falling for American propaganda, which obviously people outside of America are less prone to do that every single year. But like I, for instance, get like way more people who are like outside of America who are like, yeah, no, like this is how we understand things. Than I do Americans who are willing to like accept the reality of their own state.
yeah, it seems like I mean like despite this sort of like all these false ideas people have like the one of the major kind of like admirable things, I guess, about the state of America seems to me is just like the scientific technological output. And I know like a lot of that's tied up with military industrial complex sorts of things, but it seems like just going through that sort of thing,
Well, I
that's
would say we'd
and
hit
like
an
sort of
end to that. we've hit an end to that because like that was true, like especially when it came to like consumer tech, et cetera, like the internet and like the application of a lot of this like military industrial complex research to the consumer side of things. Like you have transistors which are originally being created so that you can have wartime communications, and then they end up being used to play rock and roll music around the country, all these sorts of things. But these days the real emphasis technologically is in pharmaceuticals. I mean, obviously, Biden came out like day one of his presidency to be like, "Hey, we're making DARPA H and we're pumping the pharmaceutical industry full of money. You have COVID, et cetera." I think that people are generally more skeptical now of the American progress and technology and stuff. It's not like technology where it was back in the '60s or the '70s, where it's like, "Oh, we're gonna go to space and we're gonna have like these like such great we'll have iPads." Like the iPad appears in like Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. These sorts of communication devices, etc., high tech communications devices, or flying cars, or whatever. That sort of technological progress has already sort of capped out. Like obviously, like the new iPhone isn't that different from the last one, and I don't see any massive step change occurring there, unless you really think that like the Meta AR glasses are like enough of a technological leap for people to be enthused by. But I think that um, we're like always on the precipice of like, oh, and then we're gonna have like real VR, which is like great, and like Neuralink VR, and we're gonna live in heaven in a computer. I just think we're never gonna make that leap, and that's like the last one that's like promised effectively by the sort of civic religion of American technological progress. But the real technological progress that's happening is all in like pharmaceuticals and stuff. So it's all gonna be it's all like drug trials and shit like that. And I think that those are like we're already hitting like those obviously have a lot of negative externalities as we see with the existence of COVID itself.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree on all those fronts, but I feel like there is still like there's still very smart people in America like working on legitimate
Yeah,
um
there's smart people all over the
technological
place though.
advances, and not just in these like sorts of
Sure.
consumer
Sure. The thing is, though, is
kind
if you look at like even there's a Rand Corporation thing about this that they put out like a month or two ago, where if you look at like what they're like emerging technologies, right? You got like quantum computing, you've got robotics, these sorts of things, the things that they're like emphasizing as like emerging technologies. China is taking the lead on these at this point. They're publishing more research papers, and they have more of like integrated supply chain. They have more of like a they have more emphasis on like engineering and stuff like that, the way that America did in the past. We're mostly piggybacking these days off of the fact that we have like an IP regime which can attract talent from across the world, the rest of the empire, basically. So we have like the brain drain of like if you're like a really good programmer or whatever in Europe, your goal is to get to America because you'll be paid a lot more for it. Same thing with like a doctor, or you're developing pharmaceuticals. You ultimately want to like you're going to end up just outside of Boston, right on this corridor which is being developed for all pharmaceutical research. There's literally, I'm telling you this right now, out in the a big city, the second biggest city in Massachusetts, which is they're building more and more infrastructure and like housing and things like that to integrate it into this whole circuit because there's a ton of research universities for hospitals and stuff like that here, and there's a lot of pharmaceutical companies, and that's really the bleeding edge of American technology going forward. Also, like, and this is also military industrial complex stuff because they're basically at this point like the future wars are like germ wars. We're already in one.
Yeah, I just think it's such a shame that there's all this like potential for, I guess, more legitimate science, like technological advances to actually like materially benefit people, but it just does not seem like America has like the industrial capacity or like political structure to really roll those out in an effective
Well, it's
way.
kind of like what we did is we kind of have ignored like the material end of these scientific processes in favor of theoretical advancements. Like you have like a ton of money going to research and stuff like that in the sense of where like you come up with the plans and then it's built in another country. Like like we have a that's really what the emphasis has been here for, is for more like theoretical work and less for the kind of holistic vision of an engineering society where like you have the manufacture of the parts and pieces and the mining of the minerals, etc., in the same zone. Ours is more expansive in the sense of like, well, you can design cars here, but to actually build the cars, like they're doing that in Mexico.
Yeah.
It's just the general like biases of the financial sector, which is again purely abstract, theoretical, like mathematical work. Like there's no physical production when it comes to finance. Like it's literally the Federal Reserve putting a different number in an Excel chart. That's the extent of the physical labor involved with printing money these days. But we have, advances in insurance, and we have advances in derivatives, and we have advances in algorithmic trading on the stock market. We have advances in gambling. There's never been more types of parlay bets on FanDuel than there is now. These are the types of technological advancements we're getting. We got loot crates, NFT. Like this is the type of advancement we have.
Yeah. How long do you think it will take for, I guess, the tech bro crowd who are like developing all these, fake, like stupid technologies to wake up to the industrial might of like China mainly, and
I
just
think again, we learn things the hard way, and it'll be the same way that they have come to or not come to the. Well, also these tech bro people, you've never met more Ukrainian patriots in your life. Let me tell you, uh, uh, they still haven't accepted the fact that like you can send all of the most advanced American armaments and shit to Ukraine, and they're going to lose to Russia. They already have lost that. All of this. Technology and our ways of doing things we developed in the 20th century aren't actually effective if we were to have like another major global conflict with conventional arms and things like that. Our military and stuff are like way behind the times. That if you look at like the Chinese military, they've learned a lot from the conflict in Russia and Ukraine. They have like integrated drones with all of their units now, which is like what has these sort of strategies that have been developing in this conflict, which is like the biggest sort of conventional war that we've seen in between like major powers in a very long time. I think you'll see this like when like the tech bros will come to realize this when they get fucked by China in a major global conflict, which will probably be within the next 5 to 10 years.
so you really think that conflict with China is inevitable? Like that's just the way
Well,
things.
I mean, inevitable in the sense that this is what the people in power are planning for.
Yeah.
Like this is the plan. So it's like I don't like, and I don't really see a means of I don't know, organizing resistance to the implementation of these plans, considering that we haven't effectively organized resistance to any of these plans. Um, so I don't know. Like, how do you stop a war with China? What are your ideas?
I don't know. I mean, the person that comes to mind is just thinking like I'm just thinking back to like George Washington and like the founding fathers when they
Those
just
racists,
yep. Just
typical
thinking back.
Nazi. You're going to the camps with me.
Oh boy. Yeah, just like how things have changed so much from like the founding principles of just like not trying to get entangled with foreign adventures and
Hey,
like
listen, I saw a very big YouTube influencer in politics say that if you support gay rights in America, then you have to support them around the globe militarily. So, I don't know. What you're saying sounds like some dude bro reactionary ideology for a class of people who are being rightfully liquidated. So, I don't know, dude. Do you want to
but
be on the right side of
but
history?
like the thing is that that kind of rhetoric I feel like is only really coming from a small segment who do
Yes,
admittedly
but
have
a
a lot of
small
power,
segment have
but
all the power.
yeah.
Like it doesn't really matter like what the man on the street believes these days.
because they don't really have we don't really that's like the notion that we actually have like a democracy in any real sense. But like the man on the street can believe that the world is flat, etc., and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. What matters is what the people who actually govern and have power believe, and they can impose upon you by force. And like you can martyr yourself or whatever by being like, yeah, I don't agree, and they can put you in a camp.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
That's the reality of it, like I know this personally. I'm literally like actively like a targeted by people who consider me their political enemy or whatever. I'm literally like the victim of terrorism by this sort of thing, for people who just want me to stop tweeting things, for fuck's sake. I'm not even trying to organize shit.
yeah, I mean, it seems like there's a tension between like, I don't know, the more passive, quote unquote, like religious sensibility of like waiting for the kingdom of God, and then on the other hand, like seizing the more material reality to like, I don't know, actually manifest the kingdom of God. Like,
Well, yeah, there's a
what's
big
the
tension in that. You want to do that as much as you can within your means, but like the more important thing is to like not use unjust means in the attempt to do so, because then you kind of handicap yourself, right? Where it's like the general like Christian notion is that you should be good Christians, and that means like not creating disturbances and things, because your goal isn't to like immanentize the kingdom of God, like right here right now, like we're gonna make it right here right now, even though there are times where you can attempt to do that. I mean, you are trying to do that in your own conduct and things like this, but uh, if it means like there were like centuries of martyrdom, like it's a serious thing where it's like people will kill you for this, and it's like you can't like be that bitter about it, because it's like that's what you should expect. Like they did it to God, so like why would you be any different? Like the whole point is that like the real like culmination of these things are kind of going to be beyond you. um, this is even like found in like the being on the right side of history discourses in a different sense, but like like Marx, for instance, right? Like he didn't create communism, right? It didn't like materialize immediately from. It was like they were preparing. They were like, hey, we're being witnesses to this at this time, and the appreciation of that has grown over time. Like looking back on it, being like, oh, that was very like far-sighted, etc. So if you want to do service to humanity in general, you have to think of it in terms of eternity, and not even necessarily, because that is a material reality. Like this eternity is actually a material reality. Like things that you do now, or like things that you are a witness to now, um, can be reflected upon by future generations, and that'll be educative for them.
yeah, for sure.
Like people who went to their like the like I don't know. There's like obviously if there's a war in China, like I'm gonna be like, fuck, this is bad, and I'll probably say like, this is bad, like we shouldn't do this is a mistake, and I'll probably be persecuted for that. Like I expect it, already being persecuted for similar positions, but like I don't have the ability to physically make the people in power do other than what they're doing. I can just be a witness to it, and like and being a good witness also means like not being like being kind of more morally upright, I suppose, than the people in power. Like that's also like kind of a necessity, where if if I'm like a fucking antifa leftoid or whatever, and I'm like, wow, America is fucking evil, I'm gonna be commit petty theft and burn buildings down or whatever. It's like, well, that's not being a good witness to that. If you're not any better, then why would anyone want to like even take your perspective as being more valid in any sense?
Hmm. Do you think in the kingdom of God will there be religion at all?
It says that there's no in the book of Revelation. It says that the world, is, like the new earth, new heaven, new earth, the New Jerusalem. There are no temples there because it is the temple thereof. That that we will come to acknowledge that there is no distinct separation between daily life and the daily reproduction of the human species and religion. That like our own governance of ourselves is religion. That like just being alive is like your witness to the miracles of God every day.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
That's how I think of it anyway. Like I like imagine like that's also like whereas like people would like talk about like oh man, the Christian afterlife, what it's like just sitting in church all the time. It's like, yeah, that would suck, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it almost seems um, like the fact that there is religion and these sorts of ways of, human like social organization and thinking towards like thinking about God is like kind of like a recognition that we're not yet at the kingdom of God. Like we haven't arrived there yet. And it's
Yeah,
like,
there's always the paradox of the sense of like in the same way that communism is described as like an end state, but also the real movement to that end state. I think the same is true for like Christianity, where it's like there is it is like an end state, but there is also like you can see like essentially foreshadowings or the potential for its own existence in the present. Like you can see the kingdom of God all around you right now if you have the eyes to see it. Even if it's not seen for everyone. That's the main difference, I suppose, is that when it becomes fully incarnate as a material reality, it's evident to all, but it's not evident to everyone now.
mhm. Yeah, I have just one more question for you about
For sure.
more geopolitical stuff. So I feel like I'm just like from following your tweets and like our milieu, I suppose. Like I think we feel like we have a general sense of the direction of like America, the direction of Europe as like kind of like a colony of America in a sense, and China,
I
like
think they're kind of merging, like in the sense that like I don't know, like they've been so Americanized, but in a lot of ways we've been like Europeanized in the sense that like Americans now are so replete with like a lot of the bric-a-brac and nonsense of European feudalism, which they now like take to be their own in the sense of like you have Americans now being like, we must defend the West. Like, and it's like, this is America. I don't know where you think you
yeah,
are. Like, you know what I mean? Like, why do you fucking care about the Hohenzollerns or whatever the fuck or the Habsburgs? Like, you're
yep,
an American. Like,
exactly.
this place exists to be free of all that. But that's become a huge part of like America now. Like, in trivial ways and like untrivial ways too. I mean, okay, I went to the state fair, right? There's little Oktoberfest like we have like fuck, what's the name? Hofbrauhaus. Like Hofbrauhaus has a little outlet, a little post-it, a little stand, in the New England State Fair, basically. Uh, and like that's a very German thing. And like obviously, I got like Polish food there. We got like we so America in having all of these things. We've also in like the 20th century imported pretty much a bunch of minorities who were like the anti-communist, obviously minorities who were fleeing communism, and they're here and they pass on their conceptions of like the authenticity of their nation, which they considered of like departed. That's like the Shen Yun like Falun Gong dance brigade that went all around America, where the whole thing was literally billed as China before communism, like i.e. the real China, not this like fake police state China, which is hyper capitalist or whatever. So there is this weird popular reaction um, re- to the onslaught of modernity, I suppose now, where you have like Disney World feudalism, where it's like we need to maintain these feudal forms, tradition, return to tradition, et cetera, et cetera, where it's like actually kind of alien to America itself. But because America is no longer like even itself, because every American is now on Reddit with a bunch of Canadians and British people and Germans speaking English and all of this. They like that. There's a sort of a supranational notion of what the West is. Like these same people would be like, oh, like Japan based, you know, um, South Korea. Like we've got the South Korean TV shows and stuff. And like those people are like anti-communist also for other different reasons for their own history. This is all sort of being, I think, brewed together into a type of new America, new like full spectrum dominance, like NATO affiliated, the rules based
The
order
first
countries.
world, the quote
Yeah,
unquote
yeah,
first world.
yeah. Well, I think that's kind of becoming a monolithic identity, at least for the like upper middle class, like the service sector class, the elite service sector class of this international market. They kind of have a class consciousness, and they are unified in this sort of corporate form. Corporate, this works like in a couple of levels to say it's a corporate form, but literally in the form of like we watch Marvel movies, like.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like the way it's going with Europe. But like, I was just gonna ask about how do you see, I guess, like West Asia, like so the Gulf, and like also like North Africa, like East Africa, Ethiopia, like these sort the like that sort of region of the
I
world.
mean, I think that they're obviously lining up closer to like the Russo-Iranian Chinese side of the evil Axis powers, of course, because we're the good guys, we're the allies. So they're going to be there. We're going to have a lot of immigrants from those countries whose parents are doctors and things like that, who are going to Ivy League schools, and they're going to be working for the CIA and talking about how this is a horrible subversion of their national autonomy and how America needs to take out these Chi-Com imperialists, etc.
So you
The
don't
the
that
term weaponized immigrant, have you heard that one? The term weaponized immigrant. I think that's like has a lot to do with our immigration policy, where we take like these sort of upper crust of various countries that are underneath our imperial dominion, and we have them become the greatest spokespeople of American hegemony.
yeah, um,
East
but like
Turkestan must be freed from the grip of the Chi-Coms, and Tibet, free Tibet, etc., etc.
yeah, I think Tibet is the one I've heard a lot of quote unquote sympathy for from
I mean, we
some.
just imported a bunch of Ukrainians too, right? Like, can you imagine what like they're gonna be raised here, but like their parents are gonna be like these like Ukraine patriots, right? And so like there's a lot of like we get like new waves of like all of this propaganda doesn't have to all like come together to any sort of meaningful worldview. It just has to appeal to people's sort of like ethno narcissism and their own particularity. I think constantly of when I used to go on the Break the Rules with 11 Joules fucking podcast on YouTube. The one guy, Lev, his parents had left Russia in the 90s, and every time I was on there, all he wanted to do was talk about how Putin was bad to me. And I was just like, this is like your own little ethno narcissistic problem. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, I didn't leave my country. I'm an American. I'm not a second gen American or like a first gen American or a third gen American. Like, been here the whole damn time. Don't care. Don't care about
Yep,
your grievances on the other side of the world.
yep. That's the real American spirit that.
That's why the American patriots are being depicted now as like Russian propagandists and things like that. Because like if you actually believe in America as its own thing and not just as like the Superman on the League of Justice on the Justice League, where the Justice League is actually more important than Superman, right? Like Superman has to do what's right for the Justice League, not just what's right for himself. Otherwise, he'd be a supervillain. Like you know what I mean, like but the American patriots, like the people who actually like, yeah, I don't fucking care about Canada or Australia or the Anglosphere. I don't care if Germany's getting oil from Russia. I don't care about all of this sort of stuff. I just want America to be better off for Americans. That's already being depicted as effectively un-American.
Yeah, but so you don't It sounded like you're. It sounds like you're seeing. I guess like Middle East, North Africa, Africa, probably maybe more broadly, like quote unquote taking the side of the like China, Russia, but like you don't see them taking a more neutral path or trying
Some
to
of them will probably try to take
navigate
neutral
that. Yeah.
paths, like, or try to play the power blocks against each other, certainly, in order to get a better deal from one side or the other. Uh, I mean, that's what you would do if you were like a smart leader of any of these people, is try not to turn into the battleground itself between these two powers, but to see what you can get out of it, the conflict between them. Um, so I don't know. Like there would be places that are more or less hot for this type of conflict. Like you might see like Brazil, for instance, being more of a hotbed for this sort of conflict because it's a little bit in between.
So you think like the places where it's more neutral are going to be like kind of flashpoints or something like
Or at least
that?
like right now, like it's really all about like strategic, it's really all about like geopolitical strategic goals. I think that America will probably put more emphasis on the Pacific and on Latin America, while the rest of NATO puts more emphasis on trying to maintain control of like North Africa and the Middle East, which is also like ironically, you had this big wave of like Syrian immigration, like North African immigration, et cetera, into Europe, which has created problems for the people who are already living in Europe and like are opposed to that. But those people are going to have kids and they're going to be there and they're going to be proud Europeans and they're going to talk about how like moderate Islam can be create like they this weaponized immigration thing I think is going to be very determinant for the future of these global power blocks.
Okay, okay, so that's an interesting new like analysis of like the nature of immigration because like before I was thinking that this like I don't know maybe some people would call it an excess of immigration into America and Europe is kind of like a way of lowering wages and
You can, use all parts of the animal. Like you can skin a cat. Like it's all useful for the same sector of society. Like in the sense that the negative externality is not borne by them. So,
okay, yeah.
and they're going to utilize it. Whatever happens to the best of their ability. Like this is like one thing that I think is funny, where it's like, yeah, like why wouldn't the CIA like become like a huge like gay pride organization at this point? Like, why wouldn't they do that? This is like one thing I have like I when I end up beefing with some of the more like right wing guys or whatever, where they're like, why is the CIA not based anymore? It's like, well, why wouldn't they use like if they're willing to like fucking assassinate people around the world and do all sorts of hijinks in the 20th century? Why wouldn't they do that for like with any means that they have available to them now? Like, why wouldn't they be using like gay marriage as a lever to do regime change across the world? Like, obviously, they're going to use that. It's useful.
Yeah, well, I
They'd be
mean,
stupid to leave that on the table.
maybe like a naive take would be that the people who would want to work at the CIA and like do these sorts of things would be, um, I guess, not LGBT and more, I don't know, masculine or whatever.
Well,
But
the
I,
thing is like, well, that was back in the day
uh,
when it was like, again, like different conditions where it was like, okay, well, you would need like men boots on the ground and like these dudes who can like, sort of fit into sorts of different societies or whatever. But these days, the main talent pool they're trying to pull from is like cyber warfare shit. And it's like, if you look at hackers, like you got a lot of fucking like sexual deviance, frankly. And if you can, if like you're gonna be like, hey, here's like carte blanche to do the sort of fun hacking work you like doing, except it'll be against our geopolitical enemies. So you'll just be rewarded instead of like when you were trying to hack, Western banks and like major Western corporations. How about you do that to China instead, and we'll just reward you for it. Like so they're trying to make it like appealing to who they're trying to recruit.
okay, yeah, that's something I haven't really considered before. I guess the nature of the work involved in that sort of line of work is,
They've even had to like they've
yeah.
even at least as far as I know they've had to like it's like especially for hackers and things, they had to like sort of weaken their restrictions on drug use because it's like if you don't hire anyone who uses drugs, then you're not going to have the good hackers who are fucking methed up.
Yeah, I guess so.
For real. Like a lot of the changes you see in all of this are is done purely for the purposes of attracting the type of people they want to employ. Uh, like let's say it's actually like a threat. For instance, let's say that like tomorrow the CIA was like, or like, the NSA, CIA, et cetera, et cetera. They're like, we're going to fire all gender non-conforming people or whatever. Then all of those people, they still have this skill set of someone who could like work at the NSA or the CIA. And it's like now they have an animus against the state where it's like, don't you want those people on your side if you're the state? Like they're more dangerous than, let's say, you piss off a trucker or something, ultimately, because
Mhm.
they can do more immediate damage as an individual. Like a trucker, for instance, they'd have to like come into some type of greater organization to really pose any sort of threat to the state itself, especially like the sort of surveillance state we have right now. But one really talented hacker could really fuck things up on their own.
Yeah, yeah, that does make sense. Yeah, it's kind of interesting how all these sorts of things that you might think are peculiar about the way, you know, government
They all
structure.
just make sense.
Yeah,
Everything
it's like
actually is perfectly rational. That's
yeah,
like I've that's the only thing I ever learned is that everything actually makes perfect sense. Everything that happens makes perfect sense.
yeah. I guess that is I guess a satisfying, at least one satisfying aspect of all this.
Well, I mean, this is what Kajev says is like all you can get out of philosophy is like the satisfaction of like realizing why things make sense. Like, oh, that's why they're doing that. Oh, okay, I get it. That's it. Like you like that's ultimately what you get. You can be like, I get it. You can also like get a job. You could be like Kajev. He got it enough where he could go work for the GAT and like go head toe to toe with people and creating a foreign policy, basically creating these international trade deals and things like that. That's like the like what like you can do with all this. So for instance, like all the people who fully understand how much this all makes sense, they're most paid for like they would be most rewarded by becoming a part of the process, right? Where that's why you see all these people like they get successful as like a YouTube pundit on politics or whatever, and then it's like they might get a tap on the shoulder from like the endowment for international democracy or whatever the fuck, or the Carnegie endowment or whatever, and be like, hey, we like what you're doing. Do you want to like be even more rewarded for this? You might have to change some of your opinions a little bit because we have a way of doing things, and like people are willing to jump at that opportunity because they're being rewarded for it. Like it's actually much shittier to like have a understanding of all of this stuff and then be like trying to tell people like normal people like the truth, and then it's like, oh, like usually for no money, ooh, like terrible incentives.
So you do think that these influencers or whatever people who get
It's organic.
a boost, you think they are doing it from the point of view of I know this is like wrong or something like that, but I'm doing it to advance my position in the hierarchy, and this is what
I think
allowed me to
most I
get
think
up.
most people's positions are like rationalizations, like post hoc rationalizations for their own things. For instance, like let's say like you've never done drugs ever, like ever. You don't care about them at all. You might be like, yeah, I think doing drugs is like bad. I don't think anyone should do them. And it's like, okay, that's like kind of an unnuanced position. But so long as you like never do any of it, it kind of makes sense for you to hold that position to be like, yeah, I just don't see the point. Like I've never done it. I never will. So you don't really need to like post hoc rationalize any sort of reason to do it, right? But then like let's say you have and like you've like it's been beneficial, but it's also been not beneficial or whatever. Then you could have a position where be like, yeah, it's probably for the best to like never do them, or like if you're gonna do them, you should be like educated on this, or like be aware of like the trade offs on it or whatever. But like you're already making a post hoc rationalization for like your own experiences. I think that's just generally the case for how people build their worldviews in general. So, like, let's say you're Vaush, right? And you're like an anarchist, an internet anarchist, or you left libertarian, whatever the fuck he says. He takes his positions first, like in the sense of like he comes to a position, um, for the reason for that, like when he gets rewarded for the position that he's taken,
by the discourse, or like, by the metrics on his videos or whatever, or, even by people giving him money, or like getting opportunities for things, etc. And I don't think it's necessarily like a conscious process. It's just like you come to post hoc rationalize your what you have done.
Yeah, yeah,
Like that's why that's like how ideology is actually produced. It's not like we have this notion where it's like, I'm going to adopt an ideology today. I'm going to go shopping for my ideology. Like which one? It's more like a holistic process. It's more of like a iterative, like continual process where there's sort of like these channels that you like go down, where there's like feedback loops. Like, you start off as you start off supporting Bernie Sanders, and then you're like, okay, well, I support the Democrats over the Republicans, so like you got to vote for Biden. And you're like, in fact, I'm going to post hoc rationalize and be like, Lenin would tell you to vote for Biden, actually, because I identify as a Leninist and I'm voting for Biden. So Lenin would actually tell you to vote for Biden. And then the next thing you know, you're like talking about how, like, well, there's different types of Nazis. Like some of these people, they were just fighting the Russian invasion. It's okay if the Canadian Senate gives them a round of applause. Like it's just a step by step process. Like you don't jump from one to Z.
yeah. It's just it's all just a bit unfortunate how that works out.
I think it's mostly like based off of like, especially if you're holding opinions for money, like, the money matters more than the opinions, or like, there are positions like you get immediate feedback. Like if you take a position and you get a lot of pushback from it, and like, it hurts your bottom line, it offends your constituency or whatever, then you'll probably be like, you probably put out an apology video.
Hmm.
It's only like really if you have nothing to lose that you can like for instance, I don't have much to lose. Like it's not like I make that much money doing this or whatever. I don't know. Like I'm my post hoc rationalization is like that I've people tell me that what I do is help them. That's basically the only thing that I think is good ultimately of like what I've done, is that other people have told me that they value what I do. If it was only about money, like this is retarded. Like I don't make any money doing this.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, I think I have to head out now, but I do want to thank you. Um, like you have legitimately, I guess, restored some a lot of the things that you talk about, and yeah, that you talk about kind of like confirm and reaffirm some thoughts I've had, like religious sensibilities and things like that. And I just want to thank you for kind of like restoring some of my, I suppose, some of my faith and
Yeah,
God and
that's
all.
well, man, that's really what I'm doing it for, is for when you people like you say stuff like that to me. That's really my post hoc rationalization is no matter what happens, like no matter what happens to me, for doing what I do, I know that people like you feel that way, and that's what I try to focus on, really. So thanks for saying that, because it means a lot to me, actually.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. All right, I gotta head out now.
All right, peace,
See you
man.
later.
Nice talking to you.
Bye. Bye.
All right. We've got three people on the docket here. We got Inverse, Andy, and Michelangelo. I think I've talked to Andy and Inverse before. I vaguely remember these, so I'm gonna let Michelangelo on. What can I do for you, Michelangelo?
About the identity of Shakespeare, because that's something that's been on
Sure.
my mind for a while, and I'm kind of confused as if is Shakespeare like the actual writer from Stratford upon Avon, or is he a pen name written by a different author?
So there's a guy from Stratford upon Avon whose name was Shakespeare. Okay, his last name was Shakespeare. And he was hired, as was often the case, to take up the name of, like, to take the legal position of like a pen name, because like in this time there's like strong libel laws and things like that, so that if you were an aristocrat and you were writing slander about another aristocrat, they would take you to the Privy Council, and this is like very, very bad for you, right? But if a lowly person is writing slander of an aristocratic gentleman, it would be more of a humiliation for him to try to take like it would be basically an admittance of guilt, number one, to go after a low-born person for their slanders, right? It would be pretty embarrassing. It's like today, where if you're like a nobody on the internet right now, like let's say right now I was like Hillary Clinton eats babies, right? Like or whatever, I was a random person, and then Hillary Clinton takes my ass to court, an absolute fucking nobody. That kind of actually is worth like you wouldn't do that. That would be a really bad move. So, but like on the reverse side, someone like Alex Jones, someone with a huge platform, does the same thing. She takes him to court, might work out better in her favor. That's like the realities of like why a lot of pseudonyms were being used at the time. So the actual writer of the works of William Shakespeare is Edward de Vere. And we know this because he wrote his own autobiography effectively in the story of Hamlet. Hamlet is also a bit of a joke on Oxford because they had a boar, and the De Vere family had a boar there, so he was a little boar, you know, he was a little Hamlet, a little tiny ham. A lot of these little puns and things like this that make more sense if you're looking at things in like the terms of like poetic encryption and how poets like to embed narcissistically, you might say, a lot of things about themselves in their own works, but in a way where there's like plausible deniability to the degree where it's like an inside joke. That's what you can find a
Okay.
lot of this sort of work, a lot of this sort of stuff in the works of William Shakespeare. And again, William would be spelled with two V's because there's a double V for W at the
Yeah, for
time.
Edward de Vere, yeah.
Yes, and he was
Interesting.
called the Double V all the time, and that was like one of his like his things that he went by. Literally, like that's like how he would sign some letters in like amongst to like William Cecil and things like that. I think it's like really like the more you look into it, the more like obvious it is, and like you can actually appreciate a ton of like little inside jokes and stuff. Like in there's a part in Henry IV where they pretend to be robbers and they rob one of their friends. And Edward de Vere literally did do this with his friends. There's like a ton of like embedded inside jokes in the works that only really make sense if like Edward de Vere wrote it. The whole story of like William, and like again, this is like a kind of funny thing if you think about it, where it's like you then have this like wool merchant or whatever who is in your playing company, who you hire because it's like your name is exactly like my pen name. That's so hilarious. And you and like everyone boosts him up as being the guy who wrote all of them, this like lowborn guy, right? Like that's kind of funny. That's like there's examples of this kind of like in reality where you have like some major songwriters, these Swedish like pop songwriters who nobody knows their name of, but they've written so many charting songs that get performed, etc., by other people. And I'm sure they have a bit of the same feeling when they're sitting in the wings and they see, you know, like someone like Britney Spears or whatever talking about this song and how it means so much to her, and people asking her how she wrote it or whatever, and she's just bullshitting. Well, it's like I wrote this song, but like
Yeah.
they get paid for like you know what like like there's a lot of reasons to write under a pen name. Like it's actually in a lot of ways more freeing than having to take all the responsibility for your own writing. If for instance I could hire some guy to be me, that would be great.
Yeah, because even like the name Shakespeare, like apparently represents Athena, who's the
Yeah,
goddess of the playwrights, and that it's like kind of a play on words
the
because she's
spear shaker.
Shakespeare's.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it just kind of makes me mad how like a lot of English teachers like they still like believe the theory that of the Stratford upon Avon
It's
theory,
because
and
they
it's
don't know
just
any history. They have no interest in history at all, and their favorite part of it is that it's become a bit of like middle class propaganda, where it's like, oh, you don't think that one of the greatest writers of all time could have just been some working class guy? And it's like, well, no, I do think that's possible. In fact, there were other working class people who Ben Jonson, for instance. There's a lot of people who like came from more lowly stations or whatever. It's like we're just saying in particular the type of knowledge that's being reflected in the works of Shakespeare, especially legal matters and things like that, is clearly from someone who had a very refined education. Like all of this knowledge of like Italian Renaissance theater and things like that. Like how would he have gotten that? Like, oh, he would have gotten the books. Well, actually, there were only a few of those books at the time, and they were all imported by this guy named Edward fucking de Vere, and he commissioned the the translations of them. So wouldn't it make sense if it was this guy who was like helping his uncle William Golding translate Ovid when he was a teenager? Don't you think this is the kind of guy who would write the works of Shakespeare? I don't know. It makes more sense to me. But again, this is way too much historical context and stuff for what an high school English teacher.
Yeah, just like the average high school English teacher, just they still like say, "Oh yeah, he's the bard," and it just makes me mad how like I know it's Edward de Vere now,
No, but
but
Edward
they
de
don't
Vere
really
would find
listen.
this so hilarious, don't you think? Like that, like it was like the whole point was to create like this sort of divide between the people who were in the know and people who weren't, which is why it was one of like the secrets really of like the early Freemasons in England. Like they made monuments that like with the knowledge of this in mind that are like encrypted to like sort of be self-evident to people who are in the know on this, because it was like a club of people who are like, we actually understand it in the sense that like we know what it's actually about. There's political stakes involved here too. Like it wasn't just because like Edward de Vere, what he was a scandal for wasn't for like being like a decadent aristocrat or whatever, but it was for his identification with like the bourgeois class who was like rising up, because he was kind of like a bastard noble in the sense that like he was raised as a ward of the state and all of his inheritance was stolen from him, and so he was actually in the same sort of economic position as a lot of these people who are like at Steelyard and whatnot, these people who are like working with the Hanseatic League to import like Rhenish wine and things like that, these merchants. They were people who were like really fighting, had to really fight for their position, and he sort of had to do the same thing because he wasn't in like the highest graces. Like he didn't have his own properties. Like he didn't really have the sort of money that usually comes with landed nobility. Like that had been taken from him, but he did have his title. He had his name, and then even to lose the goodness of his name was an ill repute. There's a lot of poems in the sonnets about how important one's name is, and like how to lose one's name is like awful. Um, because he was a he was a scandalous guy, especially for his opposition to a lot of the other landed aristocrats and their interests.
Yeah, so basically Edward de Vere wrote every single play like under the pen name William Shakespeare. Like
Yeah,
every single one.
yeah. I mean, There's also like he had a scriptorium, is what it was called. So he was a patron of the arts, not just a writer himself. But in the same way, where like let's say you're a showrunner in Hollywood, right? Like you write like the show, but you also have like a staff of writers who might contribute here or there specific lines. There's cases where there's like clearly like collaboration between other people. And also, this wasn't his only pen name. Like he wrote under a couple of other pen names, which is also interesting. If you want to like expand what you would consider to be like Shakespearean works, there's these other works that these days they now say, oh well, Shakespeare is clearly influenced by this guy who died in mysterious circumstances and then claimed to have come back to life and written a book about the afterlife. And uh, the like he William Shakespeare was one of the last of his pen names.
Mm. Didn't like John Dee do some encrypted messages in like Shakespeare's sonnets? I think that
This
was
is
one
a
thing I saw.
this is what yeah, Alexander Waugh says that it was Dee himself who did it, but I don't know if it's necessarily has to be the case that it was John Dee like personally who did it, but it's more that like the techniques of encryption that John Dee had developed were also used by the poets at the time, because the poets were also the courtiers. So this is like Edward de Vere is also kind of an intelligence agent for Queen Elizabeth
For Queen
as well.
Elizabeth. Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, which is why he's also like, if you think of like Hamlet, right? He sent away from home. Like it's a reverse. It's a like a classic like poetic reversion where in reality Edward de Vere went from the British Isles over to the continent. In Hamlet, he goes from the continent over to the British Isles, and is followed by Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who are hired by a character um, who everyone identifies with being the same as William Cecil. And this actually did happen to Edward de Vere when he went to the continent. William Cecil sent intelligence agents to follow him to make sure that he wasn't doing anything, because like they didn't like really trust him because he was a
Yeah, I
radical.
yeah, I just started reading Hamlet. I'm like on I think Act 3, but I'm trying to see like the correlation between Hamlet and then Edward de Vere's own life, but
there's a million parallels. Like it's almost hard to find things that aren't parallel. Even Ophelia. This is Edward de Vere. He was
Is the
married. He
lover,
was going.
right?
Yeah, he was going to be married to William Cecil's daughter. Was married, and then he was told while he was on the continent that she was pregnant with someone else's kid, etc. And like he drove believe like accused her of like cheating, etc., and like drove her to like basically almost suicide. And this was something that he like regretted later in life after she had died, and like you can kind of see that being worked out in how he writes Ophelia and Hamlet. Um, there's a million things. Hamlet gets attacked, gets taken, is abducted by pirates. That happened to Edward de Vere.
Yeah, yeah. And also, like the Merchant of Venice. Didn't Edward de Vere go to Venice one time?
Yes, and he did have a debt to a merchant in Venice. Yeah,
Okay.
whose name is actually very similar to the one. It's like the names are often like puns on real names. That's something that like Thomas Pynchon does too. Like a lot of writers do this. When you're writing something that's sort of like autobiographical or like sort of based in reality, in order to claim that it's fiction, but to like sort of point still to the reality in the world, you like make a pun on this person's name. Like let's say if you named like a character who's supposed to be a Rockefeller, you named him Stoneman as opposed
Yeah.
to Rockefeller.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I was just like a little bit confused. Like, I'm pretty sure there's like multiple writers, not just de Vere, that would have wrote like these masterful plays. But
Well, De Vere, the thing is that those weren't the first plays, and what you're seeing in Shakespeare in the corpus is actually like the final refined copies of plays that he'd been working on his entire life. Like there's like things like, for instance, they call the Hamlet, like which is a folio, which is basically the same story as Hamlet, and then it's like refined. So like these are works that he'd been doing and like refining his whole life. It's not even like the corpus of like one man in this short period of time, but like the refined corpus of someone who's been writing literature their whole life, and these are actually like his most mature works in the end, which is why it seems like even the most early William Shakespeare play is like so refined, like it's so like high quality, it seems almost impossible that he just kind of like popped out of nowhere to like write things of this high quality. Like where's all of his juvenilia, where's his like shittier work? If you follow Edward de Vere though, you can read his juvenilia, you can read a lot of his earlier work, and you can sort of see how it develops.
oh, do you know how people say like Edward de Vere's poetry is like so bad that
Yeah, there's
it's
your
no way it
people
couldn't be
who are
Shakespeare?
garbage. People who say
It's
that
like
are like completely nonsense because a lot of the turns of phrase and things, and like a lot of the ways, like the way the poetic rhetoric works, is like the exact same as what you would call Shakespearean. You know?
yeah, it's basically a heresy for them, like
Yeah. Well,
Stratfordians.
a lot of like the Shakespeare people though in general, they don't have like a general appreciation for Elizabethan literature as a whole. Like they have an appreciation for like the canon of English literature or whatever, and so they go, oh yes, Shakespeare, great, great. And you go like, yeah, do you like Ben Jonson? Do you like Kit Marlowe? Do you like
Yeah, they're just interested in Shakespeare, like not Christopher Marlowe or Ben Jonson, or
yeah,
it's
or
just
any of these
Shakespeare.
other people? It's like, have you read Euphues? Have you read like the Euphues? Have you read like the forbidden what is it? Thomas Nash? Have you read like there's a lot of great Elizabethan literature like and like yeah, a lot of the times it's just people like being very narrow sighted. You see a lot more like Shakespeare trutherism or whatever amongst like lawyers. Like a lot of Supreme Court justices historically have been Shakespeare truthers because they recognize like the kind of complicated legal vocabulary that's in use, which is like really only available to people who would like again like be privy to any of these sort of legal proceedings, which in Elizabethan England isn't like wool merchants. It's like, you know, like the fucking gentry who would have been able to study these sorts of things. Um, uh, there's a lot of historians more so. There's are closer to that. People have a more of an interest generally in Elizabethan, the scene in general, Elizabethan theater in general. Would read things like Fuller's Worthies of England and things like this, like little things that are considered like minor works by the later canonization of literature. Um, like those are people who are more likely to recognize that this is a pen name. Someone whose only contact with Shakespeare is the works themselves as packaged by like Folger Classics or whatever the fuck. Like they have no reason to think otherwise than what they've been told.
Yeah. Well, I have another question, and it's
Sure.
basically about the show One Piece. I've been
Yeah,
well watching the anime. I should read the manga, but like I'm starting to realize that a lot of the references that Oda makes is like to historical references basically,
yeah,
or like references from literature. Like
yeah,
Water 7 apparently like represents Venice. Dressrosa represents Spain, and then in
yeah,
Dressrosa there's like the Roman Colosseum,
yeah.
and then obviously Wano represents Japan, and then Alabasta, I'm pretty sure, is Egypt, and then elements of India in it. But it's just very interesting to see like how Oda is basically like the modern Shakespeare, and he's using like different literary
Yeah,
elements into his works. But
to
yeah.
describe like what it's really about is about like it's really about like world history. Like it's a very very ambitious work of literature, you know? Like I'll let Mage talk too cuz he's our resident One Piece expert. But it's a really really ambitious work of literature. It's not only like taking inspiration from all manners of like literary, cultural, like movie people, you know, and like sports figures. You have like Muhammad Ali type figures and things like that. It's really trying to take inspiration from as many things as possible in world history. Even like Monkey D. Luffy's name is like Marquis de Lafayette, you know, because like this is like a biography of Marquis de Lafayette. Obviously, probably made its way into Oda's hands and was like inspirational to him at some point.
Yeah, and also Zoro like represents that one Spanish fighter, right?
Oh,
Yo, Mage, give him the business.
give him the
All right, let
business.
him speak. Let him speak. I
Dude,
want to hear this.
I've found so much shit. Like I figured it all out like literally last night. There's a whole thing between like the red and blue characters basically. I mean, how far in are you, man? Like
I just started Dressrosa, man. It's really good.
okay, okay. Yeah, so like basically there's like different types of arcs in One Piece. So like each because there's like different types of islands. Like he outlines this when he like sees Vivi. Like there's different types of like seasonality to the islands, right? So every winter island is obviously going to be this like sort of like scientific island, right? Like you have Drum Kingdom, you have Punk Hazard, you have Egghead now, and then there's also um I mean, Little Garden is like the opposite of this. I mean, basically the whole thing just has like the same like double mirror stuff that like Fry talks about. Like if you really want to like dig into One Piece, you just got to read Fry basically.
Yeah, the
Because
Anatomy of Criticism and other works, but the Anatomy of Criticism is probably the best thing if you want to appreciate literature on like this high formal level of like the philosophy of composition. The Anatomy of Criticism, it will totally open up like all manner of literature and things to you.
yeah, for me like with One Piece specifically, what was most helpful was Fearful Symmetry.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but like,
I mean,
but
he
I
wrote the
legitimately think
Anatomy in the middle of writing Fearful Symmetry, so that he
yeah,
didn't
yeah,
have to
yeah.
write it in the middle of it.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. And that's pretty much how I read it too. Was like I read Fearful Symmetry, and I got to a point where I was like, okay, I haven't read the Four Zoas, I haven't read Jerusalem, and then I like moved on to Anatomy of Criticism. I moved on to like Structure of Romance, or what is it called, like Secular Scripture. I think that's the
Yeah, yeah,
title.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've been going through it. I was reading the introduction to the Great Code,
Oh, those ones are
and
good. The Bible works are good.
yeah, like I just think like the One Piece people sort of need like some sort of direction because it just turns into this like narcissistic kind of like fandom appreciation
Yeah, that's
where
generally the
it
problem with like all forms of like literary criticism these days is that it's gone like after Fry, people didn't really know what to say anymore. Like you get what he describes as like these sort of like scholastic interpretations of literature where you know you have like the Marxist interpretation where it's like you only focus on like class dynamics in the work. You don't think of it in terms of like the narrative like formal structure and like you know there's obviously like you can do a lot what you can like reveal a lot of things with like a Marxist criticism of literature. But what you're not going to reveal is the sort of meta structures of like narrative forms or whatever. You're just going to be talking about class issues using this as a lens through which to discuss Marxism. Or like you know, let's say you're a gender theorist or whatever. You're not going to end up talking about like the actual intention of the work or and its embedment in the history of literature. You're going to talk about gender and that book by it will become like basically a court document, like an exhibit through which you can make a case about something else. That's generally the type of criticism that's been proliferated. Is you have like post-colonial criticism or whatever. So it's like now we're just going to only talk about like you read a Jane Austen novel and you're like, isn't it interesting that these people probably owned slaves in Barbados? And it's like,
Yeah,
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 I
yeah.
guess, but that's not really part of the story. Like it's not what Jane Austen was trying to write about. Like you can talk about that, but now you're talking about Jane Austen and you're talking about other things. You're not talking about the work in and of itself. So like Fry's form of literary criticism is like the peak of like classical literary criticism in the terms like Aristotle would make of literary criticism, where it's about formal structures.
Yeah, I mean, like that's sort of even what he says about the Shakespeare trutherism stuff. Is that he says like, people get like wrapped up in a lot of the like, I mean, not even specifically the De Vere stuff, but just any of it, in the sense that
Yeah, it's more about
they start like
Elizabethan
ignoring the
history.
works.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
really more about
exactly.
Elizabethan, like if you're in, like I like Shakespeare's works for themselves, regardless of who wrote them. But I'm also like interested in history, so then it's like there's a different level of appreciation where you're appreciating what it was, not even formally, but politically, basically, like
Yeah,
in historically, which is a different type of. It's not even criticism; that's just history.
yeah, no, for sure. I mean, trust me, I'm in the John Anthony comment section.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
I'm on there. Uh,
But these things are
um,
like distinct things. Like you can completely teach like an appreciation for the works of Shakespeare without ever mentioning who wrote them. Like it doesn't ultimately matter. But I do think it adds like a whole different flavor to it. Like for instance, like let's say 100 years from now, uh, the Oda. It's like a reverse situation. People believe that Oda wasn't a real person.
mhm.
It's like, well, it wouldn't really matter.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. Like, I don't. It's yeah, no, it's beautiful. Like, regardless.
Like the work lives on, and that's like the whole point. Is that if you make like a formal, like a really formal, like formally brilliant work that like works with these forms in like a creative manner, that appeals to people because like that's what ultimately like it's like mesmerizing to like when you watch anything and it has like this formal structure. If you're not like hyper aware of the formal structure in a sort of cynical manner, I mean, I'm kind of cynical these days where like I can watch a show
Hmm.
and like generally predict what's going to happen just from like what's been set up to happen. There's like a general like poetic logic to things, and I
Yeah,
end up ruining movies for people all the time by being like, "Oh, this is what's going to happen in the end," and then it happens. And but when it's like done creatively, you can't always tell where it's going to go. But if it's good, you should be able to tell where it's going to go.
yeah. I mean, that's like I was tweeting about this like a little bit ago, but like I think that that's part of why like One Piece is so successful because it's like the one. It really feels like it's like one of the few things that's like inviting like a type of like literary criticism like onto itself because you have to like solve the puzzle. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like it's the whole thing is like
the whole thing is a puzzle. It's literally
yeah,
like there is a
exactly.
thing called the One Piece and this like puzzle map world that isn't put together. There's not a map of the whole world yet. That even has to be put together. All of these like different tasks of like solving the problem of the riddle of the world that's created by Oda. It's that's the whole point of literature is like creating a riddle that is effectively like the riddle of reality that you confront and then trying to solve it narratively, which is like
Yeah.
it's like kind of a presentiment of like how history will solve it.
Yeah, I mean it's really beautiful. I like every day I like figure more shit out about like sort of really like how beautifully constructed One Piece is because like there's been so many things that I thought were like completely irrelevant and then I like realized they're totally central. Like there's an arc called Thriller Bark. I don't know if you got there yet. It's the whole like gothic it's like the Halloween
Yeah, the
arc.
Notre Dame Cathedral.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's entirely central though, because it's like the first arc where you get like an image of like a sleeping giant, like, and you get like all of these like you get all of this like resurrection imagery. Um, and like I realized last night that it's like it's probably what like inverts to be like the final to be like the final confrontation. It's I don't know. It all like makes sense. Like it's really beautifully crafted, but like there's no I literally see nobody but like three Japanese people talking about it and myself.
That's like what's so interesting though about like successful works is that like people appreciate them without really like it's like a symphony or something, right? Like if you don't know anything
Mhm.
about music, you know, or like music theory and like how like these things are constructed, etc. You can't really enjoy it on that level. But because the person who made it is working is like so formally brilliant with what they're doing, that comes through to you in a way that like appears like magical. Even though it's
Yeah,
all very like scientific in a real sense, like poetry is a science, and there
yeah,
is
yeah,
no
yeah.
magic to it at all. It's all sleight of hand. Like there's no it's like magic in the way a magic show is, where it's like if you're a magician and you know how magic tricks works, and you see another magician do a trick, you're like, oh, that's a really clever trick. I see what you did there. And you're appreciating it on a different level than someone who's like, I have no idea how you did that. How did you do that?
Yeah, they're just like stupefied, basically, in a
Yeah, yeah.
sense.
It creates a sense
I,
of awe, though. It's like with any, but that's like that's what's is what's difficult is like maintaining the appreciation of like the awe, etc. When it's no longer like natural to you to feel it because you can sort of see it as a technique.
mm, yeah, I think I'm not, I'm not there yet. Basically, is the
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I started reading Fairy Queen. I mean,
hell yeah.
like you, like this is all of the stuff you know, I'm reading Bunyan, Dante, Blake, One Piece. Like it's all like sort of the same shit, basically, in the way it's constructed. It's really nice.
Yeah, it's
Um,
literally all about like putting together a crew to, you know,
yeah.
explore the world, to learn the evils and the goods thereof.
I mean, it just like makes more sense to me to like explain like even just like you know, like shit that's going on like through you know through the little allegories. Like it makes way more sense to discuss things like through Dante. Um,
Yeah, no, I use this all
yeah,
the time. Like, you know, it's oftentimes a lot easier. Like, if someone's like talking about a problem in reality, and I'll be like, well, in the book of Joshua, like, you know, like
yeah,
like you can actually, it's actually much easier to deal with these sort of more complex things by means of discussing them on the map of a story, because then the inferences you draw from that aren't like the same, in the sense that like if you're like you know, like someone who's a drug addict or something, and you give
hmm
them a little parable instead of just being like, "You're a drug addict." You know what I mean? You kind of want to more display like the spiritual reality of it through a parable is more
yeah,
communicative than a judgment.
yeah. No, 100%. Like it's far better to like yeah. I mean, tell them a story, give them some images to latch on to, than to just like be like you are a drug addict, you need to fix your fucking life. You know what I mean? Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
it's no, it's very useful. Like I don't know, I Bunyan's especially useful for that. I think.
It's also I
But
realize this because it's like when you have kids, you can't just explain fucking reality to them immediately. Like, you know,
yeah,
like you're it's actually like you're supposed to like come up with like fables and things. You're like, well, you know, you can't do that because it's bad, you know what I mean? Or it's like, oh, we don't, you know what I mean? Like why are like, you know, you get it, you're gonna I'm preparing to my wife told me that I think toddlers ask something like 75 questions a minute.
that's so beautiful,
And I was like, oh, I'm fucking ready for this barrage of
dude. That's
questions.
so sick. Oh man, yeah. No, I can't wait. It's gonna be good once once I'm at dad game.
It's great because this is like
Yeah.
that's how you end up teaching kids anyway, is through these like stories and things like that.
That's like sort of my like idea with like if I'm gonna do like a fucking like One Piece explainer, it's like I really do want it to be the target to be like fucking like 15-year-olds. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Like it's like I want them to like see the construction to be like, oh, like this is sick, instead of just being like, oh my god, uh, you know, like instead of just getting sucked into like Nami pornography or something.
Yeah, that's like the other way, where it's like you turn
Oh
it into
yeah.
like an idol and then you like worship it as a fetish as opposed to like appreciating it. That's
Well,
the
they
issue.
basically literally just go like, oh, like it's so unique, no one else is doing this, no one else has ever done this, and then it's just like this is like meaningless. You're just saying like it's so cool, it's so super cool, and I love it. It's like this is like mush, you know?
Yeah, it's not real communication. It's
Yeah, yeah,
just,
yeah.
yeah. All right. Well, I'm getting off now, guys, but it's been a nice
Much
time
love.
talking with y'all about everything. And
Much
hope y'all
love.
have a good fall because we're entering fall now.
Yeah, I've been walking in the rain drinking a yerba. It's a good time.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Peace out, everyone.